So it's my pleasure now to introduce our next speaker. Dr. Manfred Lange is currently a professor emeritus at the Cyprus Institute. His main research interests include the assessment of climate change impacts with a focus on water and energy security, renewable energy sources, and energy and water use efficiency, and the built environment. Today, he'll be talking about the impacts of climate and environmental changes in the Mediterranean. So please join me in welcoming Professor Lange.
So good morning. Can you hear me all?
Yes, loud and clear.
Very good. Let me see if I can get this going here. Okay, yes. Well, good morning, everybody, and I'm really happy to be part of this. Of course, particularly greetings to Joey, um, who's an old friend of mine. And even though I'm gonna take you to a very different part of the world, you can see in the inset here that many years ago I was working in an environment that is very familiar to Joey, namely in the Antarctic, here in front of Polar Stern. And now let me continue and get you into this by saying first that let me see. Hope the polar regions do play a decisive role in shaping the climate of the mid-latitude regions. Um, and in particular, the decline of sea ice cover in both the Antarctic and the Arctic does play a particularly important role in doing so. Um, this decline leads to increasing heat flux from the ocean to the atmosphere and favors circulation patterns that resemble the negative phase of the North Atlantic Oscillation and Arctic Oscillation with various repercussions. It may lead to extreme precipitation events even over the Mediterranean, including an increased risk of winter flooding in parts of the region. And even though we are thinking often of droughts, as I will show you in a moment, flooding is another risk that people face in this region. Satellite observations, particularly, or in at least in part, NASA's Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment, GRACE, mission has contributed tremendously to our understanding of changes in the Mediterranean water budget. Now, in the following, I will focus on a particular part of the Mediterranean, or on a region called the Middle East and North Africa, um, and its Mediterranean parts, and this is called the MENA region. Now, the MENA region is a region that is home to some 500 million people, and the population is growing, as I'll show you in a moment. Um, the increasing urbanization um, is a particularly worrisome or particularly interesting aspect. Uh, and climate warming and worsening air quality do pose enhanced risks to human health. Um, it's a region characterized by strong environmental and socioeconomic gradients and differences. By the way, the map in the background, of course, does show the MENA region. Um, and the various pressures on water availability, on energy supply, on food security and environmental integrity do lead to exceedances of societal and environmental thresholds. In other words, we are exceeding the bearing capacity of the region through our activities. And on top of that, political and societal transformations and crises that I'm sure you're all aware of do pose challenges to human well-being and a sustainable future. Now, some of the drivers of change in the Mediterranean um, include in particular demography and urbanization, as I already mentioned. You can see here the growth in population from 1960 to 2014, where we've seen a fourfold increase in population, and at the same time, we're seeing an increase in urban population at the expense of rural population. The urbanization in the region is a particular feature. High population densities and large urban centers already are dominant or prominent in the Eastern Mediterranean, as you can see at the inset or at the part here on this map. We're having at least two mega cities. That's Cairo and Istanbul. Um, Urbanization is steadily growing. It's currently at 65%. Um, what's particularly worrisome is the growth of coastal regions population from 95 million in 1979 to over 143 million in 2000 to expected 174 million in 2025. Now, the anticipated sea level rise in near coastal regions will lead to coastal erosion and seawater inundation, which poses severe risks to human dwellings and communities. A particular point case is the Nile River and the Nile estuaries, which are threatened. Um, on top of that, what's called seawater intrusion, that's to say the intrusion of seawater into aquifers, reduces water availability for communities in the coastal region. Now, if we look at the Mediterranean as a whole, what we're seeing is that the Mediterranean region currently warms about 20% faster than the globe. We're seeing that the annual mean temperatures are now about 1.4 degrees above the pre-industrial times. And one of the consequences is a sea level rise by 6 centimeters since that time, which poses the risks I just mentioned. Now, that's one reason why the Mediterranean has been called a climate change hotspot. Um, if we look at the future projection, depending on the emission pathways, we can see that this trend is bound to continue. And at the worst, we'll be seeing more than 4-degree warming until the end of the century, reference in comparison to the reference period 1980-99. In the best case, it's just about 1 degree, but that remains to be seen. One of the consequences are intensifying heat waves that intensify in duration and in peak temperatures. Summer rainfall is likely to be reduced by 10 to 30% in some of the regions of the MENA, and the sea level will rise faster than before, with regional differences though. It's expected to rise by 43 to 84 centimeters until 2100, but possibly more than 1 meter, which again would have devastating consequences for coastal communities. Ocean water acidity increases, which has a lot of consequences for marine ecosystems. Impacts of warming, particularly with regard to urban structures. Cities will see an enhanced heat accumulation compared to the surrounding land area. And this is illustrated here. I don't have time to go into this, um, but the point is that we're seeing heat buildup in buildings. We're seeing transportation sector and infrastructure that has a bearing on warming in cities. This is also due to enhanced human lifestyles, which um, lead to more energy consumption in cities, and the reduced ventilation within cities again leads to the effect that we're seeing in this figure here. And basically, the bottom line of this figure is that the coldest summer months in the future will be warmer than today's hottest summer months. In other words, these orange bars here indicate that we're going to see a tremendous warming in urban structures um, until the end of the century. Now, another issue is air quality. And what you can see here is air quality in various cities of the region. Um, and you can see that almost all, or at least the majority, of concentrations of aerosols, PM 2.5, um, lies well above the European Union limit for PM 2.5, which is 25 micrograms for cubic meter. And urban pollution and enhanced warming, as just so as shown, do pose enhanced pressure on and enhanced risks to human health. Now, uh, with regard to impacts, water, the MENA region has for long been considered a water scarcity hotspot. If you look at this global map, you can see that the orange colored countries um, of the MENA region stand out. Um, and if you look in particular at various countries and just concentrate on the red bars, which indicate the expected water availability in 2025, you can see that most countries, except for Iraq and Iran, lie below the water scarcity threshold of 1,000 cubic meter per a year and per capita. So that's a major threat that we're facing in the region. Um, if you look at the connection between water and energy, which is important to keep in mind, um, the impacts of these challenges that we've seen and these changes that we've seen um, are a lengthening of the dry season for most MENA countries. We're seeing a significant reduction in surface and subsurface water availability. We're seeing insufficient water for irrigation, which poses threats to food security in the region. We see a reduced availability of drinking water for city inhabitants, but also for green spaces in cities. Um, and the usual solution that's been implied is the provision of additional water through desalination. Desalination is a viable technology. However, it is a very energy hungry technology and poses significant uh, energy demand to be done. In addition, we are seeing an increased energy requirement for space cooling to enable um, comfortable living, particularly again in urban structures. And we feel that these issues need to be considered holistically in as many other things in the framework of the water energy nexus, which is one of the subjects that I've been studying for the last couple of years. Now, if we look at adaptation and mitigation options to these challenges, um, of course, there are, with regard to the energy sector, the deployment of renewable energies. We just heard in the previous talk about bioenergy, Um, Here in the MENA countries or in the Mediterranean in general, um, the enhancement, the employment of, for instance, photovoltaics, um, or solar energy is a particularly viable option. So shifting to renewables increases the energy security in the region, um, and also reduces the dependence of these countries on oil and gas, imports from oil and gas producing countries. Um, the employment of renewables also reduces water demand in the energy sector. However, as we all know, the intermittency of solar and wind energy reduces the energy security to some extent. And the remedy is, of course, to employ um, either um, um, storage, energy storage, or as a somewhat newer alternative, employ concentrated solar power, CSP in short, um, because here we can use energy storage devices, or thermal energy storage devices, or tanks, which at least potentially enable a 24-hour, 365-day operation. Um, and as a particular feature of CSP, which we've been studying at the Cyprus Institute, CSP enables the cogeneration of electricity and potable water, as I'll illustrate in the next slide. Um, the concept is really simple. Um, we're harvesting solar energy that heats up a storage tank, which contains molten salt. um, the heat is being extracted, steam is produced, which drives a steam turbine, which produces electricity. Now, the excess heat that is left over, so to speak, together with heat that can be still extracted from heat storage, is being used in multi effect distillation units to produce drinking water. So that's a really interesting um, uh, alternative, and it really addresses two pressing issues: water scarcity and energy provision. And as you can see here in this slide, we've been setting up a CSP experimental facility at the Cyprus Institute, where we are practicing, where we implementing these technologies in real, and we've been doing this for some years now, and are waiting to build up a pilot plant. Now, this was a very short rundown on things. And let me just conclude by saying and reminding you that polar regions do shape mid latitude climate. Sea ice plays a particularly decisive role in so doing. Um, the MENA region is exposed to multiple challenges, as I've tried to show to you. Um, Significant population growth and enhanced urbanization are particularly important in that regard. The Mediterranean is considered a climate change hotspot now and will continue to do so in the future. um, Severe impacts on water availability and energy needs um, should be addressed holistically in the context of the water energy nexus. There are various adaptation mitigation options that can be chosen, um, but the cogeneration of electricity and potable water through CSP offers particularly promising options. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for your kind attention. And I will not close without, of course, congratulating Joe on his birthday for a very impressive scientific career, and last but not least, for a rich personal life. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you, Joey, and with all of you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lange.